Hello, everyone. This is Peter Granich with a very, very special video. Very unusual. I am going to play the customer for the change. And I first want to invite my best friend, partner for 25 years, and the micro end of our planning group, Dave Suki. Dave, thanks for joining me.
Oh, Pete, always a pleasure. These are fun, right? Good to see you. We're usually operating, right? Individually. It's nice to get together and do this.
Yes. So what we're going to do here is we get a lot of questions from people. What exactly we do? Why do I say, traditional planning is a flawed process? Why cash flow is important, not what work. So we're going to try to create, remember, this is not a $1 million video expedition. We're not actors, so to speak, but we're going to try to make like I'm the new client. Dave is what he's normally doing, and what it would be like if you decided to explore whether or not we could help you in your planning. And so uh, I want to make a couple points before we get started. The first is that yes, I personally believe that traditional planning is a flawed process. You don't have to look too far. You just have to go to the disclaimer for the few that read it. And there's a sentence that says past performance is no guarantee of future success. Unfortunately, and I believe a lot of people do with good intentions, but history might tend to repeat itself, but not so much in the investment world.
Right.
Too many people depend on that and assume it's going to happen. And then they also, if they do have a plan, let's remember a lot of people don't have plans. And then the ones that do, they normally do type of base planning. I got to save for the kid. Then they start saving for college. Before they know it, they forgot about their retirement and they go from one to another. But they also only have plan A. They sit down with someone, it's thoroughly, hopefully done right. It has a lot of good intentions. But just like I learned sitting 13 years with the New York Giants when they were making their plans, not all plans go as planned. And if you don't have plan B or C, which almost no one does, then you have to make decisions during highly emotionally charged time. So what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of go through a process making like I'm the customer. I'm sitting here telling Dave about myself, and he will respond as he would if it was your first time. And I also want to make this other point. A lot of people get imaginary numbers, and they're very hard to achieve a lot of numbers that are talked about there. Here's what we like to say. Without any additional risk, in fact, far less risk, without changing your lifestyle and actually improving your lifestyle, we believe at the end we'll add about up to 40% more in your savings. And that could be a hefty amount. It could be the difference of a comfortable retirement and or not. But we don't have these magical black boxes where we're gonna go somewheres and make X amount of dollars and beat everybody and its mother. We're the wrong type for that. So I just want everybody to understand that. All right, Dave, here's my client profile. And Dave is going to
Sure.
be taking this as it's his first time. So I'm in my late 50s, early 60s. Sometimes they're in the early 60s and like to say late 50s. I'm hoping 5 to 10 years to retirement, making about 300,000 in income. Got $1 million, which used to be at one time when I was a young man a lot, but we'll soon learn it isn't as much. But about $100 million. I have it basically in 401ks and IRAs. And let me just tell everybody, I try to make an example of what the average person is. More people are like this than others, but not everybody's like this. About half of it is in an investment account. And I've been reading a little bit of this Grandich guy, so I kept about 200,000 in cash. I do own my own home, bit of a mortgage. The kids, thank God, are all graduated on their own, but they're still looking for dad and mom to help them along the way.
Yep.
I unfortunately, and this is where you find a lot of people, I don't really have a will or really any formal estate planning. The good news is I'm still managing to save between 40 to 50,000 a year. About 30,000 of that is going into my 401k. Okay, Mr. Suki, here's my first question. You got all
Mhm.
that kind of where I'm at?
Good thing. Yes. Yep.
This is always among the first questions. How do I know I'm prepared for retirement? And how much am I going to need to secure my retirement?
Yeah. Big question, Peter. This is one that comes up all the time. The one with it is also about, am I okay? Am I going to be okay? In today's world, so many clients are, or I'll talk to you like Peter. So many people are looking for comfort and security to know that they're going to be okay. There's not a lot of certain things in this world anymore. There's a lot of uncertainty. So you're getting close to retirement, and really some of the key decisions you're going to have to make, or how do you put your assets in a place where you can maximize your cash flow? So when I speak to clients, and Peter is a client, I would tell you this is about coaching and advising. I think a lot of people aren't as educated as they should be, because the industry that I work in tends to just want to capture the client's assets, tends to want to sell them product, right? And there's not a really lot of education or planning done, which is why I'll see clients in their late 50s and 60s looking for someone like us, because they've had other experiences that necessarily haven't worked out very well. So the first question I will ask you, and you asked me a very good one, is do you know what your burn rate is? So what I call a burn rate is, I feel like each month we burn through money as a family. Very important to know what that number may look like based on where you live in the country. It could be different, but do you know what yours may be?
So that tends to fall in, I presume, Mr. Suki, what cash, could you kind of maybe explain the difference between cash flow and, I always hear everybody about, I gotta make what's my net worth? Everything is going for net worth. Yet, you and Mr. Granite seem to talk a lot about cash flow. What's the difference?
Yeah. So real big difference, right? We live our lives around cash, the cash flow that we bring in, and that generates our quality of life, right? So I'll give you an example. I've seen people have a high net worth, real estate, businesses, right? Other things that maybe aren't necessarily liquid, but do provide cash flow, right? Well, they manage their day to day and their month to month based on their cash flow, not what their business or real estate may be worth on paper. So if I had a property that I was an owner of, let's say it was $1 million, and it was providing no cash flow, but I was striking checks, right, for that property every month, for the maintenance, the taxes, the insurance, and all that stuff. Certainly doesn't feel like a great asset while I'm doing that. It feels more like a liability, as opposed to, let's say I had maybe a lesser valued asset on paper. Let's say it was half of it. Let's say it was 500,000. So its net worth is a little lower, but I was generating 50, 60,000 a year of cash flow off of it. That's going to feel like a much better asset to me while I manage it than the one that's, not providing cash flow. So I've learned and teach that really successful people will always take a look at the cash flow an asset produces just as much as what it may be worth on paper. And I'm sure you've experienced that in owning assets throughout your life.
So the $64,000 question, and it may be worth a lot more to people, is how do I maximize that asset to generate that cash flow?
Yeah. So depending upon the assets that you have, so I'm going to share my screen with you, right? Because I want to, again, coach you a little bit on this. So there's a context around this that's very important, right? And understanding where you are in your financial life, right? So Peter, I've learned this, and I for the sake of time, I built this graph, right, knowing I'd have this conversation with you, right? And what I want to share about this is a few things. There are risks that we all take every year with our money, every day with our assets, right? And those risks don't change when we retire. They're still there. How we look at them, though, may change, right? And I listed a few of them here that we all have had conversations around before. Early on, when I see younger clients, they are their best asset, right? They're the ones that produce the most cash flow. And I will say that, like Peter, in your world today, your $300,000 income is your greatest cash flow asset. Unless there's something I don't know about that's paying you more than 300,000, your ability to go out and earn that is your best asset. At some point in your future, whether it be voluntarily or involuntarily, that may not be the case anymore, right? They may ask you to leave the company, or you may say, I've had enough. I want to go do something else. Well, you've done a great job of accumulating assets and building this net worth all along this accumulation phase of your life. And you may be right here thinking, hey, I heard you say 5 to 10 years. I'd like to retire at some point, maybe do something else, right? So when you do that, what happens is the net worth is now the catalyst to creating the cash flow. So those assets have to be positioned in a way to generate cash flow. And I want to teach you how to generate high optimal cash flow. Now, the difference of risk and how you look at it may change. And I've learned this through thousands of clients through the years. It's interesting when my clients are younger, and I'll use myself as an example. I have high school age, getting ready for college, and I have a grammar school daughter as well. Still, if a bus was to hit me today, I want to make sure that my family's financially going to be okay going forward, right? So I think about that in the short term. If I am my best asset while I'm working and my income is my best asset, what would happen if that got interrupted for a period of time because I got sick or I got hurt or I couldn't do my job up to my full capabilities, right? In investments, volatility is something that we talk about all the time, right? It's all over the news, the ups and downs of the markets. In the accumulation phase, I'm going to show you an example of this that you may not know, right? In accumulation, volatility is actually our friend. It may allow for great buying opportunities, right? It allows for maybe rebalancing, dollar cost averaging. So volatility doesn't hurt us as much as it could hurt us in retirement. I'm going to show you that in a minute. 401ks and IRAs are the most stored up asset in this country. More people have more money in those than any other assets outside of entrepreneurs and business owners, right? So they feel like great accumulation tools because we put them in tax deferred. They come out of our pay stub every 2 weeks. It's uninterrupted compounding. Uncle Sam doesn't get any participation in it while it sits in my plan, right? And then at some point in the future, based on when I retire, I will distribute that money out of the plan. But during accumulation, it feels like a great asset to watch grow, right? Big topic nowadays, inflation. During our working years, and especially maybe the previous 10 years, inflation wasn't as hot of a topic as it's been recently for obvious reasons. So most people, as they get raises and make more money in their professions, that's how they've been dealing with inflation, right? When you retire, if you don't have a plan for that, inflation could be a stealth tax. It could wipe away a significant amount of the purchasing power of our assets. So what I've learned in this perspective is when you do get out here into retirement, and now the net worth is the catalyst to the cash flow, the number one concern of that is, hey, I'm not worried so much when if the bus was to hit me today. I'm worried if the bus doesn't come till I'm 95. Do I have enough money to live out my life confidently and successfully? That's the number one concern of people that retire that I hear, right? Secondly, I hear about their concern, especially if they've ever dealt with an aging parent. If their health was not to be great, or do they have enough money to take care of themselves the way they would want to be taken care of? Or how do they protect their assets from being confiscated later? A lot of people in retirement are having that conversation right now. Volatility when I retire can be an enemy. It can be a cancer if I'm not careful, because it can wipe away my asset base quicker than expected, especially with the way that the portfolio gets hit with what I call a sequence of return risk, which I'll come back to in a little bit to share an example of that. So volatility is not a friend in retirement years. Those wonderful 401ks and IRAs, when I start taking money out of them, don't feel like the best asset anymore. They feel expensive. I've had more clients when they get to the age of what's called required minimum distribution, otherwise known as RMDs, be very frustrated with the taxes they're paying in retirement because they never envisioned that when they were putting money in the plan, right? So there's a lot of conversation that we're having around that. And then inflation, if I don't have a plan for it and I'm living on a fixed income, which unfortunately a lot of Americans are, it eats away at my wealth very quickly, or I'm doing without, and it's not how I envision retiring, right? So part of this discussion that we're going to have together is understanding, how do I transition my wealth from this accumulation planning into this distribution plan?
Well, I guess the concern then, and again, I'm playing the role of that person, although I know the answer to this, and now I'm going to ask it. How does one go about protecting their current assets and still grow the assets while worried about inflation, stock market volatility,
Yeah,
taxes, and
yeah,
a whole bunch of other things that this
yeah.
Grandich guy keeps talking about?
Yeah, yes. That's now that Grandich guy definitely is bringing awareness to the market. Well, let me tell you what I don't think works very well, and then I'm going to share with you what we believe and have been doing for a very long time that has worked very well. The mindset of institutions around this. So I want you to think of this, right? Most of the assets that you have, Peter, or most of the American public has, are stored up in investment accounts, 401ks, IRAs, brokerage accounts, and they're managed by either an advisor or an institution. And I learned this many years ago. If I sat at the head of the board of an institution, right, and I wanted to make money, I really feel like it comes down to four very simple strategies I need to implement. The first thing, if I'm in that board meeting, is I'm saying, well, we don't manufacture anything. We don't really make anything. What we need is we need money. So we need to capture assets, right? And then when we capture those assets, we want to build planning that teaches people how not to touch it. So we want to hold on to it. And we don't want to hold on to it for a year. We want to hold on to it for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, maybe a lifetime, right? So as long as possible. And then when it's time for you to come get money from it, I want to build ideas and thinking around how to pay the least amount out so I can maintain that asset on my balance sheet. And I really believe it. I'm not picking on them. I'm just saying, if you understand a little bit of what's involved in the game, to me, those are four rules and principles that all major financial institutions follow. And if you think about it, that's really the reality of the marketplace. And Peter, I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but does that make sense?
Well, thinking out for a moment, I'm the president and some of the big names we have. That's exactly, at the end of the day, intentionally or unintentionally,
Right.
that clearly is the business strategy or the model that they follow. There's no question about that. I stand behind that 100%.
So when you get out to retirement, right, there's a traditional planning concept around this, right? And I teach about this. So I have these assets that I've worked my whole life for, that I won't want to make sure I get value from them, right? Whatever they're in, okay? And if they're all in the markets, right? Not in real estate, let's say, not in a business, they're what's called IA, not AI, IA, investable assets. So if I'm 65 years old, Peter, I want to retire, I need to come up with an income plan. Right? And what the industry will teach is they will teach what's called a safe withdrawal plan, which basically says, how much cash flow can I expect to get if I have all of these investable assets? Million, 2 million, 3 million, whatever the portfolio is worth. If I total them all up, there's a safe withdrawal plan, but I'm going to show you in a minute, it's not so safe. Okay. That is taught. When I got into the business in 1999, believe it or not, right? I met Peter. The rate that I was taught was 5.5%. So if I had $1 million client on paper, they could expect to get $55,000 a year of cash flow from their portfolio. And we'd simulate variations of the outcomes of possible portfolios. There's a strategy out there called Monte Carlo simulation. Right? So with high probability, the client would still have plenty of money left out to age 100. Right? 10 years into my career, what's commonly done today came out into the market, known as the 4% rule. So most people understand that. If you Google it, you'll get millions of hit. 4% of what my investable asset base is worth, I can expect to get, right, in cash flow. That came really into the market about 2010. 10 years later, studies get updated. And when interest rates a couple years ago, again, were very low, the new number was under 3. So what I was watching was a client was put under pressure to continue to have to build a bigger net worth, right? Because they were expected to live off less interest every single year. Product of the, and I'll show you an example, fixed income returns and longevity of a person living longer, right? Most people, when my grandfather retired, his life expectancy was 5 to 7 years. You know, my dad retired, his life expectancy was 20 plus years. When I retire, right, my life expectancy may be 30 years, right? So there, we have to stretch the money out much longer. The challenge is a lot of what's done and taught, we don't control. Okay? Here's an example. Again, I like using information I've lived through my whole career. So this is a chart of fixed income yields that goes back to 1999, right? And it goes to 2020. When I got into the business, getting a client more than 5.5%, 6% on their portfolio was not very complicated. Every fixed income investment I could choose for them paid more than that. And then what happened in 2008, we all may remember or not want to remember, right? We've seen the lowest interest rates in the history of our country over the last 10 years till fairly recently, right? Till 2022, where interest rates came back up. Now, I work with a partner. He's on the call here with us playing the client. But if I was to ask him going forward, what does he think may happen with interest rates over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, if it's that Grandich guy, he'd probably say we've seen absolutely the lows. There's a whole bunch of reasons to expect interest rates to be higher, not lower. And depending on certain aspects, it could be a lot higher if it becomes more difficult for the United States to keep paying these large sums of debt that we acquire.
Yep. So we could all agree that I think there's things in our future that are probably there. Higher taxes, higher inflation, right? Like you said, interest rates, stock markets that maybe not cooperating. So the way that the industry has handled planning is they've asked the client or the investor to take on more risk, right? So most retirement plans, you go to an investment advisor and you're in your 60s, will likely recommend some sort of 60-40 blend, right? 60% of your money would be in stocks and 40% of your money would be fixed. Okay? And then the expectation would be that 4%. What has happened, and I'm going to show you some success rate on that, is because 4% has not been enough for most people off of what they've accumulated, right? And we've been in a very good bull market. I see clients come in with portfolios that are 70 to 75% in equities and stocks and 25 to 30% in fixed. And what's occurred is there's yield here that they're living off of, and then there's returns here that they're living off of as well. That is very risky. Right? So I'll give you a chart that'll explain that. So this is an example of the difference of volatility and risk in a portfolio during accumulation, Pete, and then volatility and risk in a portfolio during distribution. So in accumulation, what this is an example of 3 different portfolios, A, B, and C. Okay. And they go through different rates of return, right? Some portfolio A has a big early start, portfolio B is kind of consistent, portfolio C, not so well. Right? And if you take this out over 25 years, the sequencing in which the rates of return are applied to the portfolio doesn't really move the needle at all. Because this example, this client or clients, portfolio A, B, and C, wind up in the exact same spot, regardless of when they hit an up market or down market, if we use the sequencing and then reversed it. Right? That makes sense?
Yep, I got it.
You got it? In retirement, completely different game. Right? Portfolio A looks great. Client retires, had $1 million, right? They go out 25 years, their portfolio's grown and they've taken out their 4% plus adjusted for inflation. Okay. Portfolio B, that's the slow and steady, right? I make a consistent return every year, right? Interestingly enough, made 7% was my return. Okay. I spent through half of my capital. May not be the most comfortable thing, but that's what a lot of what happens for clients that don't have a good plan. Portfolio C, devastating, right? I'm out of money, right? And that's because the sequencing in which I had a bad year in the market when it hit my portfolio, because I'm taking distributions, can affect the outcome really, really dramatically if I'm not careful.
So let me just interject one thing right here, Dave, and I'm saying this out of pride. I would say out of 100 people that were told from a variety of people all around the country in different aspects that talk the 60-40 rule, this has never been shown to them.
No. Nope.
I know it. You know why I know it? Because we hear that from people when they come. Hey, no one ever showed me that.
Yeah. Yeah. And Peter, so a big piece in this is what I call the 3 R's. The first one is rate of accumulation or savings. So you said you're saving $40,000, $50,000 a year, right? That is a fairly good percentage of what you earn. If you earn $300,000 a year and you save 40, you're saving more than 10% of your income. Okay? In a perfect world, we love to see 20. And we show clients how to get there, by the way, and they don't live any differently. The second R is the one that most people are worried about and have no control over. It's their rate of return. So whether I invest in mining companies, I invest in CDs, I invest in real estate, I invest in private equity, I put it in an S&P 500 fund. As much as I like to have control over it, I typically don't, right? So rates of return can be all over the place, right? Throughout my accumulation and then in my distribution. The third is just that. What is my rate of distribution? And you said this earlier, right? Well, the industry goes off of a 4% rule. And what you said earlier is we often show clients how to have 20, 30, 40% more cash flow, not only today, but in their retirement, right? So that's taking that rate of distribution and dramatically increasing it. And the key is learning how to do it without taking on additional risk. And it's not by investing in a more riskier asset. Obviously stocks could pay more than bonds or, than treasuries do, right? That's not the answer. It's about understanding, how do I solve for the problem I'm solving for, which is when I retire, it's a cash flow strategy that will dictate how I live my retirement and how I protect my base. And the way that you do it is you need to have multiple strategies working together. So Peter, now I'll go off on this. You worked with the New York Giants plenty of times, right? 4 years. A lot of professional athletes we've seen and worked with, right? Football's a great analogy for life sometimes. That is a team sport. The quarterback may get all the glory or all the blame, but we know if there's not other people out there doing their jobs, right, it doesn't work. Good financial planning is the same way. There needs to be a cohesion and engineering of assets together to produce a greater output. And that's what we're teaching and coaching on every day.
So listen, there's so much more to this, and maybe someday we'll get into even the further of this, but I think what's important to close on, and I'm going to ask you to basically explain how we work with our clients, is that in the typical financial service industry, if you were to go get hired now, you'd probably be told that in order to deal with a new client, you'll probably meet one or no more than 3 times. In fact, the sales manager probably say, if you have to see them more than 3 times, you might as well get rid of them, blah, 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 blah. In our business, it's an absolute minimum of 3 times and probably 5 or 6 or 7, depending on the complication.
Yeah.
Of course, it involves so much coaching and really rethinking people to finally understand how money truly, truly works. And that's why we talk about the coaching as part of the teaching. And I think that's one of the things that separate us. So let me close again as the client and say, okay, Mr. Suki, by the way, as a diehard Jet fan, I was impressed you used the Giants.
Well, they've been more productive, Pete, as we
Hey.
know, right? There are Super Bowls there.
Okay, so the bottom line to this is, what happens if what you showed me here wants me to take the next step? And if I happen to become a client, what can I expect year after year? Because as you brought out in the beginning, so much is talked about collecting assets. If that's what a firm is doing a lot of times, they're not going to have a lot of time to spend on their already in the house clients.
Yeah.
Let's close with that, Dave.
Yeah. So it's a great question around the fact of how do we care for our people, right? Or I call it our tribe, right? So the first thing that is very important to us is, instead of the assets being, or the dollars being the assets, our view is the client is the asset. So regardless if they have $10 million, $1 million, $100,000, we are committed as a team here, and Peter, you know this, right? That we take care of people, right? That's first. Secondly, we can't be all things to all people. So we tend to only want to take on about 50 new households a year, families. The reason that is the team we've built here, right? And we have layers of people on the team that every client interacts with, from servicing of their plans, servicing of their portfolio, servicing of their strategies, servicing of just getting money in and out, right? Or just talking to them about general things in life. I run the team in terms of the strategy and visit with every client on that, right? But the expectation is that we will touch clients more than 5 to 6 times a year formally, right? And then in between that, they will get access to other things that we're updating them on and going on and updating and reviewing and things of that nature. But that's unique. Most of the financial service business does not do that. And that's why we only take on that amount of new clients a year, because we want to service. And the reason we know that this is working, and Peter, you know this, we have a 94% retention rate. That is huge. And the reason I think that is so high is we believe the relationship begins when the client onboards with us. Most financial professionals believe that's where the relationship kind of ends and culminates.
Or peaks.
Or peaks, correct. Right. So that mindset is very, very important. Right. And there's members of the team that they'll interact with, right? Not only myself, which allows for them to feel like they're getting taken care of, the questions are answered, and then we're moving things forward as we see fit.
And so to close, we also have a yearly review, but now that I've heard all of this, if I was that person and I would sit through this and learn more in the first presentation than what you showed today, what would happen after that if I said, okay, Mr. Suki, I've decided to go forward with you. What happens next?
Yeah, so our client onboarding process, we have a team that handles that. So you would interact with them, and then based on the strategy, the other thing is there's not a cookie cutter model here that we use. They're very customized and unique to creating cash flow, right, strategies. And we do manage a significant amount of assets for clients because that's part of creating the cash flow. So we have you set up with the onboarding team. You'd bring over, whether it be assets or implement strategies we recommended. I didn't mention this in our talk. We do a lot of estate planning, so we would likely be talking through wills and trusts and things of that nature. So once all of that was handled, it probably would take a few weeks. You're onboarded, you're on the CNA, in the CNA family, and then we would set up a service arrangement where we're going to meet with you so often, and we book those meetings out.
Real quick to close, obviously retirement's a specialty, estate planning. But I do feel, David, and again, I'm part of the team. I'm the macro guy. I'm the
Right. Yep.
big picture guy. Your whole team is more the micro. The thing that I feel is really lacking in the financial service industry is for business owners, particularly business owners with an exit strategy. I really think we excel at that. Can you just touch on that for those
Yeah.
that may be listening during that?
Yeah, Peter. I think about 10 years ago, I probably spent 20% of my time having those conversations. It's more than half now. So more than half of the clients we're working with are entrepreneurs and business owners that don't have a succession or exit strategy. So we've built a exit strategy process, right, that we will walk them through. It's a 7-step process from the time they initially say, hey, I might want to sell this company one day, to the time they do the transaction and get the check from, whether it be an inside sale or what's known as an outside sale. We'll walk them through every step to get them to the finish line, and then how to move them from owning the business and getting checks from the business to getting checks from their investments and the assets that they now need to create.
All right, so hopefully for those that have watched this and you've watched it through it, obviously you're a client, you've already known this and experienced it. And like you said, 94% of all clients end up staying with us. I just think it's phenomenal and a testament to what we do. If you like to learn more, contact me. We'll send an information package, and certainly it's been an honor and a pleasure. And is there something you'd like to close with, Dave?
Yeah. So Peter, I think the audience, I would tell them this. We'll do another call, because I'd like to spend some time on the accumulation phase as well, and how they can save more without living less. I think that is so critical right now in this country because inflation is running crazy. How to continue to become a great saver first, and then we'll do that call. We'll have to do another call on that.
Yeah, that'd be great, but also people that go through the process will be shown that. They
They'll
don't
be
have to
shown that as well. That's correct.
wait for that. All right, thank you very much, Dave.
Great to see you, Peter.